Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in to Demand Decoded. I'm Dan Silgo, Marketing Manager at Blend, and we have a new guest on the podcast today, Sean Williams. Sean is part of the strategy team here at Blend as our campaign manager, and his role is essentially dedicated to helping our clients get the best results from PPC across multiple channels, but I'd say a key focus on search ads in particular. I'm so pleased to have Sean on the podcast today. It's definitely been a long time coming, and today's episode is tapping into his experience and obviously all about paid search audits. So anybody who's currently running Google Ads, this episode will essentially guide you through how to audit your account and make sure you're making the most effective use of your budget. Sean, so great to have you here. I know you're going to help so many people today, with your amazing PPC knowledge.
Awesome. Thank you for having me here, Dan. Yeah, it has been a long time coming. Like ever since this started, I've been quite excited to come onto here and just basically nerd out about PPC and everything. So yeah, like some bits about my own experience. So I started PPC nearly about 5 or 6 years ago. I started off in a smallest agency. It's kind of actually similar to the size of Blend at the moment as well. And that kind of began my entire journey into this foray. So over time, I've seen PPC, its fundamental basics have always remained the same, but it has very much evolved as a platform. And it's only gotten more powerful as search platforms themselves have gotten more powerful, and a lot more areas are starting to leverage the power of just user search intent in general. So after my experience in the first agency I worked at, which was called Push, I then eventually made the foray into a much larger agency known as MediaCom, where I had the pleasure of working on PlayStation's account actually.
Mm.
So I stayed and worked there for about 2 years before I decided to finally find something that was a little bit closer to home. And lo and behold, here I am at Blend.
Yeah, I think like your experience is so interesting and valuable as you've kind of, like you said, you've name checked PlayStation there. Like you've worked on some huge PPC accounts, and now transitioning that knowledge into the B2B space, into a lot of SMBs, some enterprises, and really combining those two things. Like it's so interesting a lot of the time to get your take on things, like to understand how the big players are doing it. Um, and yeah, how we can kind of combine those two things. It's been really interesting tapping into your knowledge.
No, of course. And it's honestly been still an interesting learning experience for me as well. I mean, I had much prior experience working on both small, largest B2C and B2B companies, like in the previous places I worked at, especially during my first foray into PPC with Push as well. Like there was a
Mm.
large mix of both large and small B2C, B2B organizations. It really gives you a really interesting insight into how each market operates, as well as that search user intent as well. So like I said, the fundamental basics are always the same, but the way you go about it can be wildly different, within the spectrum of things. Search itself has evolved in so much time, both on the key platforms, Google and Microsoft Ads as
Yeah.
well. And even YouTube as well, which is
Mm.
also steadily evolving too. So yeah, it's always a learning experience, but yeah, I very much feel like that gained a lot of useful knowledge. I'm learning a lot of useful knowledge from people like yourself as well as everybody else at Blend, and it's nice to see how much more I can incorporate that into our own PPC campaigns.
Yeah, for sure. You've almost brought like the really tactical, intense knowledge of PPC and been able to combine it with a lot of the big picture B2B strategy stuff, that we do here at Blend. And, you've kind of become a combination of those things. But, enough of blowing your own trumpet, I suppose, and, making your head any bigger. Which is quite rightly big. But I suppose, Sean, like I'm happy to kind of open this up to you, really, and wherever you want to take this PPC audit and take our listeners through exactly what to do, you know, let's open the floor up to you.
Awesome. So yeah, as you said, Dan, this whole session is going to be about how you would go about auditing a PPC account and the basics that come through that. I think the best way to start off this conversation is by first going into, for anybody who isn't aware, like, what is PPC exactly? So PPC is an acronym for standing for pay per click. Effectively, it's a form of advertisement where ads will show on platforms, search engines such as Google, the most common one, as well as things like Microsoft Bing as well. When a user then clicks on that ad, you then pay for that person clicking on. It's as simple as can be in its most basic form. There's a lot of intricacies into it as well, but we can go into that a
Yep.
bit further on as I start explaining the process. But yeah, the biggest platform, of course, for this is Google. It's the largest search engine in the world. It has the biggest global market share. But Microsoft Ads Bing also is actually quite a key player within this
Mm.
space as well. It particularly has a much higher market share within the US, and it is actually a growing search platform. What I found in my experience of using it is that typically Microsoft Ads tends to have much cheaper CPCs on average when compared to Google. There will be instances where it's a bit more expensive, but few and far between from what I found, anyways. But it is like, it's oddly enough like a decent platform where you might find the unexpected, especially actually in a B2B scenario, because of course it plays into Microsoft Edge's own browser, which is their default browser on pretty much
Mm.
all of their hardware as well. And when you're in a workspace, I know there's a lot of us that use, say, Google Chrome, for example, but there are actually a lot of individuals that do use Microsoft Edge, which means you can actually tap into those users when they are within their workspaces and whatnot, which is what makes it more favorable to B2B, as well as the fact as well that it has access to LinkedIn's own targeting
Mm.
parameters as well. I sound like an ad for Microsoft Ads now at this point. Right. But it is actually, I think it is a handy thing because not many people probably think or consider that as well as a platform to use.
Yeah, for sure.
So, so the next area then, I guess, is starting from number one for your audit. Now, before any good audit, you should always understand what is your goals. What is your
Mm.
PPC campaign's goals, to be more specific? So PPC can be used for like quite a few things as well. Like for our own context, especially here at Blend, we find PPC is better positioned more towards middle and bottom of the funnel targeting.
Mm.
Because when a user is searching, like depending on the keywords that you use, depending on what the user searches for, they can have quite high intent. And that's ideally what you want to go for, because when a person is searching, they likely know what it is that they're searching for, provided it's not a question. And that means they're more likely to take action by clicking onto the actual ad itself and then taking the desired action, whether it's booking something like a demo or just simply filling out a form to get their contact information. You can also use it for B2C context as well. In fact, it's pretty much it's like B2C is probably the larger leg of it, of course, because it is a great place to find customers who are willing to like just try and buy your products. For B2B, we just have to be a bit clever because there's not as much search volume, but there
Mm.
is decently high intent within that field as well. It can be used for other purposes, like say, for example, brand awareness, but it's not something I would recommend or typically do, mostly because like brand awareness is incredibly hard to measure as a campaign itself, right? Like especially like if you're especially within the B2B space where the cost per click can be quite high as well. Sometimes it's also just not affordable in that sense. So yeah, most importantly, knowing what the goal of your PPC campaign is, whether it is just to get conversions or it is just to get clicks, will kind of help take you in the right direction of what you're trying to look for within your audit.
Yeah.
That then,
So, sorry, just
oh,
before
go
we
on.
move on. So, by that, do you mean you've just outlined two preferable goals there, which is clicks or conversions, right? But if you're only getting clicks and you don't want conversions, like, should that really be a goal of a campaign? Like, I think for most B2Bs, the goal of Google Ads, and I think, like you quite rightly outlined, should be that high intent, bottom of the funnel focused area where you're getting the most bang for your buck in most places. Because, like you said, PPC ads are really expensive and only rising in cost. So, doing any top to middle of the funnel advertising on, say, Google is really, really expensive. Still, probably more expensive to do bottom of the funnel advertising, but the actual return on that is usually greater given the intent.
And personally, I would agree with you. But as with anything, it's always about the context, of course, because people will have different strategies going on. Like for us, mostly PPC is again organized and already at the bottom of the funnel for our strategies. But for other people that are doing also multi-channel strategies where other
Mhm.
platforms are involved, there could be other avenues for having PPC more at the top. It could be, for example, that they just simply want to get more website visits um, onto their website and not really focus necessarily on the conversion part just to get exposure. In which case, PPC can kind of be like a way of boosting clicks in a way, similar to what LinkedIn does with their paid boosting feature as well. You're basically paying to just try and get more traffic to get an influx there as well and see how people may want to react to your website. So context is very much more important. But again, like, and also market, I think is quite important as well. Certain markets tend to actually be quite cheaper than others, especially within B2B as well. You can get certain B2B markets
Mm.
that tend to be a lot more cheaper that tend to be a lot more cheaper and thus a lot more affordable within that scope. And you also need to take into account competitiveness as well. Like how competitive is your market? Is your market full of similar people of your size? If maybe you're an SME sized business that you're competing against, are you competing against the big players? Or is it that you found your niche amongst those big players and you can afford to then go for those users and you're just trying to build up like website traffic effectively? So I
Mm.
think context is important, but I would personally still try and like keep PPC more orientated towards that middle and bottom funnel approach. There are other avenues you can take within PPC if you wanted to target more upper funnel. Like for example, there's display campaigns as well as discovery campaigns now called demand generation campaigns. They used to
Oh.
previously be called discovery. Those are probably the type of campaign formats you would use if you wanted to do something that's more brand awareness because they're cheaper per click and they're more widespread. But I wouldn't expect to get any real decent conversions from them in particular. Again, that depends on market, at least not from a B2B setting.
Yeah.
B2Cs
Yeah.
might have more success, but not so much on B2B, at least from my experience of what I
Yeah.
found.
Cool. Okay. Well, sorry, I rudely interrupted you before you were going to jump on to the second part, I think.
No, no worries. All questions are welcome. But yeah, so the second part of your audit. So if you know what your goals are, then we come up to the next layer that you need to check, which I like to call the basics or the health checks, as some people within this field call them. So before you really do an audit, you should first really establish that like the key areas of your PPC campaign are set up correctly. Because if any of these key areas are not set up, you could find that auditing is basically useless at that point. Because you could be like, oh, but this campaign's not performing well. But yeah, but if you never had like, for example, your conversion tracking in place
Mm.
correctly, how can you really evaluate the performance of the actual campaign? Right? So going through some of these, like let's start off. Actually, yeah, let's start off with conversion goals as a good one. So conversion goals. This is extremely important to get set up correctly, like at the beginning. So we use HubSpot, so it's actually quite easier to set up conversion goals within the platform, then have them imported over. But for those that don't have HubSpot in place, that means you have to be a bit more manual with setting up your tagging using Google Tag Manager, making that's correct. You might use also Google Analytics 4 when it comes to setting up your conversions there, unless you've set them up in-house. But making sure your conversion tracking is setting up, doing a few tests to make sure that it's recording properly is essential. Because if that's not set up properly, then you'll never know what the success of the campaign was in the first place. And that actually goes on to another good point, which what did you set up as a conversion as well?
Mm.
Like if we're talking about high intent, then for me, a conversion is someone who's come through and has filled out like a high intent form that I know that like this user is definitely someone who's
Yeah.
interested in the service or whatever product it is that I'm trying to propose to them at the end of the day. If you set up a conversion such as a newsletter, which bear in mind, you can do, we typically actually have a term called soft conversions, where we don't really consider them like your high intent conversions, but it kind of helps gauge interest in that manner of speaking, but not something we use to kind of gauge the success of the campaign, right? So if you've got something like simply like a newsletter and that's your primary conversion, like bear in mind again, this goes back into point one about your goals. Maybe you do want your campaign to do
Mm.
that. Not something I would recommend, but maybe you do. But in this hypothetical, let's say that it's not, then you might find that your campaign has been like, oh, I've gotten 500 conversions for like so cheap. This is amazing. And then you find out that like 99% of them are just simply newsletters and no one really cared that much about it. So it's very important to make sure you establish what your high intent conversion is and making sure that's set up properly. This then also funnels down into making sure your UTMs are set correctly. Your UTMs are going to be very important for just doing individual tracking on the basis of like your keywords to your ad groups to your campaigns, especially for whatever other reporting tools you might be using other than Google itself. So making sure those are there will help you with reporting in the future. A few of the rest are more health checks then. So for example, do you have any ad disapprovals? It's important to look through those to make sure no ads are being disapproved, make sure no keywords are being disapproved as well. Making sure that your campaign, this is actually a bit more of an optimization, but making sure your campaign is ideally not limited by search volume or budget. If it's limited by search volume, Google's basically telling you that the keywords you've set are no one's really searching for them. And being limited by budget means that there are a lot of people searching for them, but you don't have enough budget to meet like the full demand of it. That's more of an optimization thing. So I won't call that like a primary thing you need to have sorted, but it is quite important to take a look at that and try and resolve it as quickly as
Yeah.
possible. So you know you're getting as much traffic as you can.
Just on that one, Sean, before you move on, the budget one in particular. So, I'm not as experienced as you in Google Ads, but LinkedIn, in particular, when it comes to advertising, will often give you these recommendations. If you spend, £500 more, actually, it's daily, I think, isn't it? So if you spend £50 more a day, you'll get this many more impressions. Is it that kind of thing? And should people actually ignore a lot of those recommendations because it's purely just Google trying to make us spend more money, which, they do and they're very good at doing? Or, are they genuine recommendations people should take up? Or is it just a money grab by Google?
So I'll say it's like a mix of both, really. They are genuine recommendations because Google has millions, if not billions, of search inputs coming into it like all the time. So the level of accuracy I would actually rate as being quite high. But I would say that it can sometimes feel like a money grab because one time I remember doing this, and then like I believe this was with PlayStation actually, where I did increase the budget because we had leeway to do so based on Google's recommendation. And then kind of like week after week, it kept telling me to increase it further. Like we started off from like nearly like £40 and then €40, and then it like nearly wanted to balloon me up, like with all the increases going up to nearly like €200. And I'm like, yeah, no. Like, even though it is technically true, if you did spend that much, you are likely to get like what it is forecasting you can get. I feel like you need to kind of temper yourself when doing it. I feel like the limited by budget is actually a good indication to tell you that there is more potential for a campaign if you invest into it. However, you shouldn't do it unless you know that that campaign is somehow bring either two things. Either that campaign is bringing you value, in that case, it's worth putting more money into because you'll just
Yeah.
make more return then. Or it could be the campaign isn't performing as well because it needs more budget because it's very competitive. So at that point, you need to ask the question, can you compete on that same level or can't you? If you can, then there's nothing wrong with putting up more budget and testing it, right? And see if you do get anything back from it. If you really are that strapped for budget, then it is more of a reevaluation to be like, can you afford the keywords that you are trying to bid for within this campaign? Because that clearly tells me that like you can get more traffic, but it also probably means that there's a lot more other people probably bidding for it as well. So it's a matter of like really pick and choosing your battles and just knowing what's available to you.
Cool. Okay. Got ya.
Awesome. So a few other things as well to make sure that you do have in place before you do your auditing as well. Well, I guess it is part of the audit technically. Another thing is your location settings. So making sure that you're targeting the right countries, making sure if there are any countries in particular you don't want to target that you've put as a negative. Most importantly as well, and this is a very common mistake I do see a lot of people make, is your location settings. So when you're setting up a campaign, by default, Google likes to put down target people who are in my targeted location or also who take an interest in my targeted location, which basically means if you targeted, let's say, for example, the UK, if someone was in America and they were interested in something within the UK, it means your ads will show to them as well. And in most cases, you don't want those people because you're not going to reach those people unless maybe your organization can reach those people, but in which case I feel like it is wasted spend and you're just better off directly targeting locations
Mhm.
within your location targeting than relying on Google to just target anybody who might search up the UK within this example. So making sure you're only selecting like people within your targeted location. This is the same for negative locations as well. Like making sure you're only negativing people that you've specified within your negative locations as well. Making sure those settings are have been put correctly is very important. Otherwise, you might find that you'll actually get a ton of wasted spend because some person maybe up in like the Philippines, for example, happened to take an interest in the UK for in this instance, and you didn't want to target those people anyways. And
Yeah,
then
good
that
for that.
also then and then that also comes into negative keywords as well. Negative keywords is an ongoing optimization, but if the campaign, if let's say the account has been around for a while, you want to make sure that they are keeping up with their negative keyword checks, especially because in these days, well, we typically target mostly using
Mm.
exact match on Google. This was because quite a number of years ago, Google changed the way searches work. So the three categories you have, or four because there is another one, is broad match, phrase match, and exact match. There is a fourth one called broad match modifier, but it's not really used too much today, as far as I know anyways, but at least within B2B. But broad match basically is the broad, as it says on the tin, the broadest that you can go. If you had a keyword that incorporated three different words into it and you did broad match, effectively you're telling Google to target anybody who has at least searched one of those words,
Mm.
regardless of anything. So it's very open. Google themselves are trying to promote more broad match now because it's now powered by AI to be a lot more specific while still like trying to get you more searches. I still wouldn't use it in this contest because it can get very expensive for a lot of irrelevant searches very quickly. Next, you have phrase match. Before phrase match actually used to be a lot of the bread and butter of PPC. So if you had a keyword that also incorporated three words into it, it means that if someone searched it up, as long as the search term contained those three words in that order, your ad would show for them. So it was a good way of controlling searches while still being open at the same time. But nowadays, because of what's now known as close match variance, which
Mm.
comes on to my point of exact match, it's kind of like it feels similar to broad match of the olden days than what it used to be. Like exact match is what we typically use for most of our campaigns now in the B2B setting, just because it's as specific as we can get for users who are searching those terms. Again, because close match variants exist, it means you will get people that search something different to your exact match term and your ad will still show for them. Effectively, exact match just basically became the new phrase match
Yeah,
in a
it's
manner of
crazy. Like
speaking.
the evolution of those categories is just crazy, isn't it? It is Google just loosening the reins on those categories, essentially, to spend a little bit more money. Um, and it can help. Don't get me wrong. In some cases, I've seen it when we had ads running last year when somebody would search for an exact match and there was a very slight variant, we wouldn't have captured that if they didn't have the variant in place. But to be just on the nose with this, are you basically saying if anybody is running broad match keywords right now as part of your audit, turn them off? Like
Yes.
change to are we even saying avoid phrase at this avoid phrase match keywords?
I would say phrase would be a last resort option if you were really spent for getting traffic. Like if you're really struggling, then I would say try phrase and see what comes through, but really be on top of your keyword negatives then. So check what searches are coming through. This is another thing, just a caveat for the audience as well. You will, because of changes Google made in terms of privacy, especially with GDPR, you will never be able to 100% see every search that your ad has shown for. It's impossible
Mm.
now. You will get a snapshot of that data, so you can still do your negative keywords based on what Google basically lets you see. But yeah, you won't be able to see 100% of the searches like we used to like years ago anymore. But yeah, I would 100% still avoid broad to this day. In B2C, it could still
Mm.
potentially work, especially if you have the budget for it. But in a B2B setting, even if you had the budget for it in a B2B setting, the searches are just too open, just too broad. Even for phrase match as well, like if the market is open enough, it can just get too broad really quickly. Like I have enough fun already doing negative keyword research for the campaigns running just exact match as well.
Mm.
And that can already be a bit of a daunting task. So when you open it up to more volume, it can get even more daunting and a lot more tedious. So I would say best to avoid it. Use phrase as like a last resort option, depending on the context of things, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Got ya. This may have been part of, somewhere else, but within the basics, do landing pages come into that? Obviously, not part of your Google Ads account, but a key part of the actual ad conversion process, right?
Absolutely. So landing pages, I find landing pages is already always a funny topic to discuss about with fellow peers as well as clients themselves, actually. So landing pages in this context is a very specifically built page for PPC. At the end of the day, like we said, because we want to target more users who are very high intent, ready to make that decision, we don't want them dilly dallying on the website itself. Like they'll be lost in translation at that point. Having a purpose built specific PPC page where the user can go on, they get the info that it is that you want to give to them as well. This actually also helps from an optimization perspective as well, because on Google, like you do have things like landing page experience and your ad rank factors. Your landing page plays into that. So you want a page that can load up quickly, gives the user the information they want in a nice, presentable way. Basically, is your page scannable? Can a user read through this page without having to waffle through oodles of text to understand what's going on? They are more, and also like plastering the CTA throughout the page as well, reminding them constantly that you want them to do whatever action it is you want to do. It's fundamentally important. There have been a lot of debates, like here in Blend as well, about whether you can keep the navigation bar or
Mm.
remove it as well. I personally am in the camp of where you remove the navigation bar, mostly because when a person's going onto the page, you could argue that you give them a way to escape that page if they want something else. But then I'm like, that's fine from maybe an SEO perspective. From a paid perspective, if you've paid especially a high CPC for that person to come on and they've gone somewhere else and not done anything, that to me is a wasted click. Like you will always get wasted clicks, so you try to minimize that wastage. You try to convert them as much as possible. And especially within an environment where conversions are few and far between, trying to minimize as much wastage as possible, like, is key as well. So yeah, landing page definitely plays a big factor, and I cannot emphasize enough how important it is as well. Like you could write an amazing ad, you could target the right people for your keywords, get them onto the page. But ultimately, if you're getting the traffic, your CTRs are good, your CPCs are good, but none of them are converting, then what's the point of your PPC campaign at the end of the day? Like
Mm.
the destination is just as important as the starting point.
Got ya.
So this is when we then start diving into your numbers. So I would say to begin this off, there is no sort of like concrete set path that you can take when it comes to analyzing your metrics and where to look at within the campaign. Again, we only do this assuming that like all the basics have been met as well. But yeah, like depending on where you start, you can branch off into many different directions when it comes to looking at your numbers. So a good example is actually the ad one I just mentioned earlier. So let's say you look at your clicks, impressions, and CTR. CTR being click through rate. That's the amount of people who have clicked on your ad compared to the amount of people that have to the total amount of people that the ad is shown to, which is your impressions. If you have a very high number of impressions but low amount of clicks, you can already identify that there's likely a problem with your ad copy. Now, obviously, average CTRs vary amongst industry, right? But like if your CTR, I'm gonna say, let's say your CTR is maybe 1% or lower. I would say that's actually very low in the context of like any industry, to be fair. at least in terms of just search. So that's if that's low, then it's likely that there's either a disconnect between your keywords and your ads, or your ad copy just isn't correct. So the first thing I would actually look at then is your keywords. Are you targeting, like, say, the right people? Are your keywords okay? Like, are these certain, are you sure this is what your audience is searching for? If you're confident with that, then look at your ads. Are your ads relating to your keywords as well? This is very important. It's what's called ad relevance within Google itself. So ad relevance is kind of like how much of your keywords, I guess, appear within your ad copy as well. Like, if someone searches a keyword and they find that keyword is within an ad, there is a good chance they'll click on it because it's relating exactly to what they wanted to search for in the first place as well. So yeah, that's a good indication to look at your ads and thinking, what else can we change? Like, does this actually appeal to our audience that's searching for these things? Or is it a case that you've not, like, included enough keywords within your ad
Mm.
copy as well? Like, so that's a good way to explore it. Then let's also take another hypothetical. Let's say you've got good clicks, impressions, and good CTR as well. Let's say then that maybe you're getting conversions on that campaign, right? But your CPA is really high. One metric you can then look at is your CPCs. Like, if your CPC is high, that's going to translate into a high CPA. CPA being cost per acquisition, which is the amount that you obviously pay for to get that conversion. So you can then also, again, look at the keywords. What keywords maybe have the highest CPCs? Is it worth running this keyword? Like, is the cost worth it for the conversions you're getting? Or are there certain keywords in there that are high costing and not converting? Maybe it's worth pausing those because they're just not working.
Mm.
Or it could be a case that, or another thing you can look at as well is your bid strategy as well. There are many different there. So nowadays in Google, bid strategies, most advertisers are using automated bid strategies where they go and do the bidding for you. You can still do manual bidding, but no one hardly does. Especially, like, if you've got a big campaign, you'd have to manually adjust those keyword bids or ad group bids, however you
Mhm.
do them, like on a day by day basis. They're changing that much. An automated bid strategy basically does this for you. So you can cut that task out of your life and focus on more important things. So the way we do it, at least here in Blend, is we typically start a campaign off at the beginning with maximize clicks. So maximize clicks is where Google tries to go and get you as much traffic as possible for the budget you have specified. So we do that at the beginning, kind of like to basically collect data. So because there's no conversion data to work on, maximize clicks just helps us get that traffic data in. So then we can see if anybody does convert from that. If we're finding people are converting, we might transition then to maximize conversions, which then, as that says, instead of trying to get as many clicks, it tries to get as many conversions. And then if we have enough data from that, we can then do what's known as target CPA. Target CPA is where you now tell Google you want to get a conversion, but for a specific cost. So if you have enough conversion data, this can actually be a very powerful tool. Typically, the way Google recommends it, and I actually agree with them in this, is that you would start off with a CPA that's actually slightly higher than yours. This gives the system room to learn, basically. So as it has that time to learn, and if it is achieving the CPA target you set, you can steadily start to bring it down. It's basically playing the long game. You're looking to bring that cost slowly down further and
Mm.
further and further until you reach, like, the bottom peak that you can for it effectively. There is one more bid strategy, which I would even argue is more powerful if you get the data through. The only thing about B2B is because lead times can be quite long, it can be a while until you get sales data on those conversions. If you do happen to have them, you can explore another target option, which is target ROAS, which stands for return on ad spend. This form of targeting is good, like, because it allows you to understand the value PPC is really bringing in for you in terms of pipeline. Then, like, if you're able to tell Google that, like, the last few conversions were, like, worth 100K to you, that's good signals for Google. It can then be like, all right, if I know those conversions are worth that amount, I'm going to then go and try and find other conversions worth the same amount, basically. So that's why target ROAS can be very powerful as a tool. Like, if you know that you can be like, I want to try and target like 400% return on my ad spend, and Google has the acquisite data to do that, it will. Over time, it has reduced the restrictions to allow like smaller advertisers to be able to use these, but I would only use them when you're getting adequate amounts of data. So I'm not even talking like in the realms of like free conversions to be able to use like target CPA or target ROAS. So I would even go as far to be like maybe around like 10 conversions a month. Before it used to
Mm,
be about like 30 conversions a month, but they have reduced the restrictions now, which has been handy. In fact, we actually use Target CPA on one of our clients, and it was actually a really good tool for bringing down CPAs by like factors of like nearly over 50% at one point as
yeah.
well.
Wow. So on that, just for the other marketers listening that aren't, as in the weeds as PPC as you certainly are, when it comes to optimizing a campaign for conversions, like what is Google actually trying to look for from its audience in order to do that? Obviously, you've provided the conversion data from a particular conversion. I imagine Google can then identify, you know, more data about that person that they can't share and understand exactly like who that is, their search patterns, like all of these things. Is that right? Are they then looking for more people just like that? Like how does it work?
Yeah, so let's say that you've got your conversion settings all set up correctly and you've specified what they are. So if you have like say your conversion as high quality lead within your conversion settings, that's your primary conversion. Then let's say you're getting conversions coming through on that. And then let's say your bid strategy was maximize conversions. If those are the people that are converting from the way you've specified it within your conversion settings, Google will look at those search intents, those search inputs, like how did these users, who were these users that converted, like look at all the search inputs they did, what they were searching for, what they were bidding for. Let's say those users were searching particular search terms. Google will then look at that and then potentially then start showing more ads towards those search terms. So you might
Mm,
even see certain keywords get more traffic as a result of that as well. By doing that, then Google can look to try and get those people who are searching those things converting. Effectively, it is trying to replicate who those last couple of conversions were, effectively,
got ya.
using all of that search input data that we can't see, but we know Google does have it.
Cool. Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
No worries at all. So a few other examples I can give as well of like what you're looking at in terms of optimization. So a good one to understand if your landing page is working well is your conversion rate metric. So if you're getting good traffic coming through, good CCR, you've got decent CPCs as well, but maybe your conversion, maybe you're getting a low amount of conversions, right? If you're all of those tick the boxes and your conversion rate is low, then that's a good indication that there is an issue with your landing page. So that could tell people that like there's something on your landing page that's not resonating with users. It could be that it's too slow. It could be there's too much information and it's like and people are going off of it. At this point, you will probably need more third-party tools, such as, for example, MS Clarity, which can look at the page and look at heat map data to see what users are doing on there. But that initial data of Google is what steers you in the right direction to be able to figure out what exactly is going on that landing page. And it could even be, again, this goes back looking at your keywords as well. So when you look at when you go onto the keyword view on Google, you can view your quality score metrics. Your quality score is a mix of several different things: your ad relevance, expected CTR, landing page experience. If you find for certain keywords, especially your high traffic ones, that the landing page experience is low, then that's another indication that there's something going on in your landing page that users aren't liking. It could even be that like your ad relates to your keywords, but then nothing about your ad and keywords related to the landing page that the user clicked on as well. Which, of course, if that happens, they're likely going to click off because they're like, oh, well, this isn't what I wanted
Mm,
at all. So it is important to review your landing page. Again, this is why it's important to have a devoted PPC landing page as well. It's easier to control and it's easier to make optimizations to. If you just drove people towards your website, you probably have to go through so many barriers just to make different changes on there. And anything that changes on your website is likely going to affect SEO as well and other channels, which you don't want to do. You want to have a more concrete plan as to when things happen onto your website. PPC pages allow you to have that separate entity where you can go ahead and make changes and not have to worry about muffing anything else up on your website, especially because,
yeah.
of course, overall, if you do generally have like issues with your website, then you're just going to make even more problems for yourself later down the line.
Yeah. Sean, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit. Uh, and I think you'll, come up with a really good answer for our audience. But you've mentioned a few times individual metrics like impressions, CTR, things like that, and what to do if they're good or if they're bad. How do you actually know, though, if I'm looking in my ad account, I see, X amount of impressions, uh, a 2% click through rate. How do I know if that's good or bad? And like, because the action that you take is all determined by that fact, right? Good or bad. Like, how do you know?
So I guess there's a few things you can look at. Like if you know what your industry is, you can always actually look up some industry benchmarks as well to compare yourself against. Yeah, and those benchmarks are taken from averages, but they can be a good indicator to be like, oh, if either people in my industry are getting like a 5% click-through rate, but I'm getting a 2% click-through rate, that's already an indication that somewhere's going wrong, so potentially. But you can also do basically comparisons as well. So if you take a certain time frame, this of course is dependent on how long your campaign's been running for as well. But if you take a certain time frame, compare it to another, see if things are increasing or decreasing as well. If things are decreasing, like especially like in areas they shouldn't be, like if your CPC goes down, cool. If your CTR is going down, not good. Or like if your traffic or impressions are going down, or if your conversion levels are going down as well. Like looking at those trends will kind of also help you understand if things are progressively getting worse as well. But I think also maybe the best place to start, especially if you're looking for high intent conversions, is like, let's say your campaign's been running for 6 months and you've not had one conversion. Right. I think that already actually brings
Mm,
up a good starting point as to where to look at. Like, um, because obviously, again, a PPC campaign that's not getting you any return is just going to eventually become wasted spend as well. So that can be also, so looking at areas like your conversions, have you gotten any conversions? No, can also kind of help steer you into the right direction to then start asking yourself the other questions as well. Like, again, are you targeting the right people? Are your keywords okay? If your keywords aren't okay, then maybe you should try different keywords. If they are, look at your ads. Like, are people like coming through the way that you want to? It can be quite a bit difficult to tell initially, like if metrics are just inherently bad or whatnot, especially if you don't have that much understanding of the market, which is why I say looking at like certain benchmarks is good as well. But I think fundamentally understanding your goals as well is probably a good way to understand whether certain metrics are like good or bad. Again, like if your main goal of your PPC campaign is really to get conversions, conversions is a good way to start off and see how it is. Again, this is also assuming that all your health checks are okay and everything has been set up correctly. Because again, if things aren't set up correctly, there's not much point looking into anything else.
yeah. And I might be jumping the gun here because I know we were going to discuss pipeline and revenue. But of course, like everything you do in marketing, all of your investments, mainly are there to drive pipeline and revenue. They are to make sales in the most simplest form possible. So if you're running Google Ads and you're not getting any pipeline or revenue from it, like you say, start with conversions because usually that's the most immediate thing that you can get. If you're targeting high intent commercial keywords, then in theory, you should be able to generate a high intent conversion off the back of that, in the same click. Pipeline and revenue may come later, depending on sales cycle lengths, but you could see over that period of time, are the contacts, leads, deals that originated from Google Ads actually converting into high quality pipeline and then closing into customers and close one revenue? If not, it's time to look at the drawing board. And I have been pretty brutally honest about Google Ads on this podcast and other episodes that so many businesses are wasting so much budget here. Um, and a lot of it comes down to like poor optimization, right, of ads. It's not always a problem with the platform. Don't get me wrong. I think sometimes it is, like Google Ads is not right for every business, but a lot of businesses can make it work, but it's just due to a poor optimization. Like you've spoken about all the things that you need to optimize, and so many marketing teams don't do all of that.
Oh yeah, of course. I feel like Google has a little bit of blame here in the way that they promoted themselves recently. Like they have very much promoted themselves in the way I think of making PPC sound easy in a way of setting up. I mean, it's not exactly hard to set up a PPC campaign, but it's the strategy behind it at the end of the day. It's understanding where it fits into your business. Of course, you need to test it to understand if it will work for you at the end of the day. And I think in a lot of cases it can work, but it's what you say, like it's putting the effectively the heart and love into the campaign and making sure it is optimized to be able to run effectively. But again, I think there has been a lot of pandering as well, where like one of the biggest things that Google have been promoting recently at the moment have been performance max campaigns. I've heard
Mm,
some mixed things about this, of where it really works for some people and where it doesn't work for some people as well. But in essence, it's basically trying to fold every single thing into one, like everything that you can pretty much do in Google into one thing. That's what performance max campaigns are at the moment. This isn't something that I think would work for any of our like my clients at the moment, to be fair, but it
mm,
is something that they have been trying to promote, and especially as well with the fact, like I said, that they've been trying to heavily promote broad match. There is even another thing on Google as well on campaigns, which is the in the overview area, which is their recommendations, or as they like to call it, the optimization score. And boy, do I hate this score,
mm.
because it's effectively Google measuring how well optimized your campaign is. On paper, that sounds cool. It could be like, I'm only 60% optimized. What else I can do? Oh, Google's recommended a load of things to me. And then it's like broad match. No, I don't want to do broad match. He's recommended like ad copy. You don't even know the context of my industry or business, and you're recommending me ad headlines that make no sense or whatnot, or do this or do that. Like use display, use discovery, that sort of thing. You can get rid of them, and then Google just increases the optimization score anyways for you. But it is very much a case where if you don't know much about PPC, you look at those and just think, oh, if Google's telling me, it must be fine. And that's where the expertise comes in, doesn't it? Because
Yeah.
if you don't know, you're probably doing something that might not actually work for you, especially if you haven't thought about it. You don't have to do it, but they present it in a way that makes it sound like you should be
Yeah.
doing it. And I think that's the fundamental problem here. Not all the recommendations Google make are bad. Like there are cases where it can actually do nice recommendations. In fact, even on Microsoft, actually, I remember implementing some keywords it recommended because I was like, actually, those are some pretty decent keywords. I'll
Mm.
give them a go.
Yeah.
And they actually did work pretty well. So not everything is bad. You do need to look at it with like a pinch of salt, and like look at it like a fine-tooth comb as well, to make sure that like whatever you are implementing from a Google recommendation is something that is worth doing at the end of the day. But to the uneducated, it is very much presented in a way where it feels like that you should just do immediately all these things to get a 100% optimized campaign, and then everything will be hunky dory, when that's not the
Yeah.
case whatsoever as well.
Yeah. Got ya. And before we kind of start to wrap things up, as we, approach an hour or so on this, one thing that I've come across in lots of businesses is the difference between branded campaigns and other types of campaigns, usually targeting high intent commercial keywords, right? And you see it so often where you look at conversions, you look at click through rate, whatever, and you look at pipeline and revenue and conversions, the majority of it is coming from branded campaigns, branded search, where I think in a lot of cases, you can probably capture that through organic search. If you turn those ads off, you're probably not going to see a huge drop in pipeline and revenue. I might be wrong. Would be good to get your take on that. But I've, turned them off in the past and it hasn't had a huge impact, because if somebody in my mind is searching for your exact brand, they want your brand, and like they will just find another way through to it if you're not running a paid ad on it. And then you compare the conversions, the pipeline, the revenue to your other campaigns, and they're performing much poorly. So if you take an overall view of it, you're actually just inflating all of your numbers through those branded campaigns. Whereas if you actually looked at a campaign by campaign basis, you'll see a huge difference in performance.
I remember years ago in the first agency I worked at, like one guy that I got along with there, he we had this conversation about brand campaigns, because it was actually a really normal thing to do, like at least back then as well. I know it's still done today, but it was more so done back like nearly 5 years ago. But we had a like he told me one day that like, yeah, shut off my brand campaigns. I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you shutting off your brand campaigns? It's like they provide literally no extra value. And I like over time I am also now fully within that park that they provide no intrinsic value. Because it's like you said, you're bidding on your own brand name. Now, from a brand protection point of view, they can be pretty decently. I would put a low budget to them if that's your purpose for using them, but I would never use them as a means for generating revenue. Because what extra value have you actually brought in? You've paid for someone that was already looking for you.
Mm.
Like you could argue that someone else is probably competing on your name, but to be fair, if someone else is showing an ad for your brand name, that means they're running a competitor campaign, which I would never do in this day and age because they're stupidly
Okay.
expensive as well. Like, what's the like again? Like, it's you're basically bank in B2C. You might be able to get away with it more, but not for B2B. I feel like you'd pay stupidly high CPCs for something that immediately has like zero, like will have like nearly zero quality score because you can't put your another person's brand in your ad. That's a no-no. You can bid for it as a keyword, but not in an ad copy. So yeah, I don't think they bring any extra value because it's just like you say. If someone was searching for you, they would have just gone through you organically anyways. In which case, even if you pay a small cost for your own brand name, that's still just wasted spend, in my opinion. And I wouldn't do them personally. The only extreme I would do them in is if like someone really was bidding on like my brand name and I just wanted some form of brand protection. I would give it a low budget because it's going to ultimately be cheaper for me anyways because my brand name's going to be on my landing page anyways and you can have your own brand name in your ad. That's fine
Mm.
as well. So you're just going to ultimately get higher relevancy, higher quality scores, and it'll be cheap for you to run in the long run. But if I looked at a brand campaign and be like, oh, great, you got 30 conversions from this brand campaign, why did you pay for them?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like you don't need to pay for them, and I wouldn't do brand campaigns today unless I was absolutely desperate. And even then, I would actually probably consider not doing them anyways because I don't see the point. If you're trying to do PPC, you're trying to get new customers. Like you could say that those people from the brand campaign were new customers, but again, they already know who you were. You're going for the people that don't know who you are exactly. They know what their issue is, they know what they're looking for, and you want to appeal to them, right? Because that's what really generates like further pipeline. Heck, some of the people coming through branded searches could just simply be repeat customers, right? From a B2C point of view, that might be fine. From a B2B point of view, like if you're the type of business where like your customers are going to be long serving anyways, do you really want to keep paying for them to come back to you all the time? Like that doesn't make much sense to me as well. So I wouldn't do it. If you are considering doing it, I hope you're only doing it for the purpose of just like doing brand name protection and that's it. But never use them for the idea of just trying to generate more intrinsic value from like people as well. Like just do SEO. Like I know SEO can be a bit more expensive in the long run, but you will but that's the thing, it's the long run. It will be more worth it to you to do it that way and just optimize your organic results then.
Yeah. Well, in theory, right? And if your website is working correctly, you will show up for your brand name anyway, like via your homepage. So
Exactly.
you don't
Exactly.
really need to do a huge amount of optimization to get your homepage to rank for your brand name. So, yeah, for sure. Look, Sean, I mean, there is so much value that you've spoken about in here. A lot of tactical advice, which is exactly what I knew you would bring to this episode. I suppose just to try and wrap things up here, you've covered a lot there, and there's a lot of things that marketers can go ahead and check in their ad campaigns and the metrics to look at, all sorts, really good stuff. I suppose the next thing to do is to plan those actions that you want to take. Any advice for people to go away after they've done this analysis, this audit, to then plan those actions and work on their campaigns?
Of course. I would say when you're going through the audit, try and make recommendations for actions as you're going through. But like, yeah, when you're going through this, so like if you're, for example, if you've already seen spotted all the issues on just the basic like setup areas, that's already an action plan there. Make sure that your conversions are set up properly, make sure negatives are being done, make sure the location settings are all good and dandy, make sure you've got your device settings done up. Like I find like, for example, that in B2B, like it's better to just simply target people on desktop than mobile. Make sure that your ad schedules are set up so you're not showing your audience ads like say on the weekend when they're shut off at that point, because that's just wasted spend as well. Make sure those things are done. If that's all good then and those actions are done, then you can start looking into the areas I said. See like where the fundamental issues are within those campaigns. Like, is it your ads? Start making an action plan over how you can do your ads. Is it your keywords? Start thinking about like maybe doing new keyword research from there and maybe completely restructuring your campaigns from that point of view. Once all that's done, then even think about then looking at your landing page, or if you don't have one, think about creating one like urgently as well. Like take the time to really think about one exercise. I think that would also be good, like with anything, is doing a persona workshop exercise as well. Understand who your audience is. What is it that they look for? What is it that they search for? What are their main pain points that you want to research as well? When you do that, it will make the actions of writing new ad copy, organizing your landing page significantly easier, because you'll have a much more concrete structure and much concrete messaging over how you can then orientate what type of keywords your persona search for, what they want to see in the ad that they were likely to like. Put yourself in their shoes. Would you click on that ad? If not, you probably don't want to serve it as well. And then finally, the conversion point of view. Is this the landing page? Is this the information they want to see? Is this the information they want to see? Are they more top level? Are they more technical? Maybe they want to see some more technical details. Maybe they want to see more graphic imagery, and whatnot. And then once you've got all of that good as well, and let's say all of that is fine, the next big step in terms of action is then making sure that the people who are converting are the correct people as well. That I believe is then going to have a lot of collaboration with your client or your sales team, where if you're in house as well, to understand like, are these the people that like they want to see, like that are bringing the value into your business? If not, that itself will also steer the direction of maybe you need to change up the way you're targeting users on your PPC campaign, or maybe it's something with the sales team. But no, I won't get into that one now. Now that's something another day. But yeah, I think then like when you go through that list, you can then start really planning out like your actions and making yourself a roadmap. So you're doing this in a good time frame as well. Like it'll be impossible to do all of this at once.
Amazing. Cool. Brilliant stuff there, Sean. A lot of advice for the audience. I hope everyone's found this really useful. So, yeah, let's wrap it up then. Hopefully, you enjoyed this episode of Demand Decoded. I think it's safe to say, Sean, like if anybody's looking for any advice or help with implementing their PPC campaigns or auditing them, like just reach out to us at Blend, or even, shoot you a DM on LinkedIn. Always happy to chat PPC with anybody, and just help people really get the most out of their campaigns. So yeah, with that in mind, let's wrap it up there. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time. Bye everyone.
So, bye everyone. Thanks for having me.